Hey, Chapel here, and today we're going to be talking about the undisputed worst spell tree, Unholy. Now for PvE, people love this tree, myself included. It's a lot of fun, but take this into PvP and you're going to be miserable. Everyone will agree it is bad. Its only saving grace is Soulburn, which I've already talked about a lot in my previous video. The overall problem is that in 1.0, Unholy's design premise has leaned further into skeleton summons, whilst also indirectly making skeletons much weaker by having so many more ways to heal from them, and having counters be stronger that skellies always proc. I'll now talk a bit about all the spells aside from Soulburn to talk about the problems with them. Starting off with Death Knight. Now this spell actually does have one very strong use case, but it is an awful design. In raid defense, it can be spammed on golems and defenders in raid whilst using Scholar Blood, and is a very oppressive AFK raid defense strategy. If you take this into duels or open world, however, you'll struggle to deal any damage as it constantly procs the counters, constantly gives healing, and you'll only ever deal damage if the other person messes up and you get a lucky proc chain. But there's not much skill expression on how to play this when you just press it and it plays the game for you at that point. Second, we have Veil of Bones. 1.0 leaned into skelly summons rather than the execute damage, and this is bad. In Gloomrot it's hard to compete with Blood and Chaos Dash, which sat far above all the others, but Unholy had a small niche where fully stacked with buffs, and especially playing Rogue Blood, you'd be able to nuke low health targets. If it kept this same design going into 1.0, it would actually be in competition for one of the best dashes, but with the way it is right now, it's easily the worst dash in the game instead. Corrupted Skull. This thing was already bad. I'd now say it's the worst spell in the game. The one win condition it had before was the Agony debuff, where you could slowly kite and burn them over time, but this has now been removed. The projectile hits for Pistol, and the skeleton summons just screws you over. Bone Explosion. This one's not actually terrible. It does have a place during tier 1 progression. It's a good spell to get before people get iframes, and it's a good way to spend your first Unholy talent point. But later on, it does get outclassed by its counterparts of Void and Frost Nova, but it still remains somewhat playable with Scholar Blood. And for the last regular spell, Ward of the Damned. It had one job in Gloomrot. It could cancel defensives with the knockback duel. That's now been removed, and skeletons are worse, making this also in competition for one of the worst PvP spells in the game. Now lastly, I'll quickly touch on the ults. Army of the Dead, it's been designed in a way where I'm not even sure how you'd change it to make it viable for PvP. It's a funny concept, but I don't know how you could change the design to actually be a balanced spell. Spiders on the other hand, the rework was decent, they're actually in a good spot, so I've got no complaints on that one. Now, is there a solution to possibly fix this disaster of a spell tree? Here are my ideas for it. First of all, the Agony effect. It is now a boss mechanic for Krieg in Ironmine. When he spins through his skeletons, it applies a debuff which after a delay will cause skeletons to explode, dealing significant damage. Now Corrupted Skull has a duel to explode skeletons, but this thing is a joke, it hits for nothing. So instead, I think Corrupted Skull as baseline should have this effect that Krieg has, which explodes skeletons after a delay, dealing huge amounts of damage. I also think this could then be added as a duel for both Bone Explosion and Ward of the Damned to help make those spells better and more synergistic. Second is Skelly Mages. With the way Unholy's designed, the warriors are designed to be fodder, whilst the mages can be kept alive to actually do damage. The trouble is that mages fire projectiles and also just proc counters all the time. If they were instead given an AoE cast, this would help prevent that and make them remain an actual threat instead of a hindrance. The last thing I'd want to see is a full rework to Death Knight. The spell wasn't very interactive during Gloomrot, but still had some nuance to it. But its 1.0 design is awful. There is no thought in this spell at all. You put it down and it does its own thing. It's not interesting, it's not fun, it's just a bad design. Which is a shame because conceptually it's fun, so I just want to see better from it. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed. If you have any thoughts about this skill tree or just the game's balance in general, leave a comment down below about it. And in the meantime, have a great day. I'll see ya.